How long does it actually take to concept, prepare, sample products, and start your brand? It is longer than a lot of people think, but it's also one of those things where if you start now, whether you're fully invested in your brand journey or still working on it or looking for the future, you can actually knock quite a lot out in part-time and in chunks until you actually get to bringing your vision to life. In this video, we're going to walk through that entire journey, through what you do when you're first starting out, through your actual sampling process, through production and the time that that takes, to getting ready for launch. And I'm going to break down as much as I can inside there so you can have all the tips on things I think you can execute simultaneously and all the tools I'd help you use to make sure you're successful. I've been in the middle of sampling and creating a bunch of things myself for the new valuables brand that I'm putting together, that I'm using to leverage a bit of my creator audience to put some cool visions I think are really interesting into life. And so I'll show off a bit of that on the way as well. So we can actually kick off there. So I just do have some new samples. So first starting off is these bags, which I plan to put all the hats we put in, all the small goods. Put some decent time into making sure it was a nice premium bag, reusable. I really always love those old Crown Royal bags. I used to keep them, so we did that here. It only took one sample to get this. We designed it. They'd sent me a bunch of fabric options. Let's see what's inside. Pulling out. So as many of you know, the brand I'm working on is car themed. These are leather versions of the classic fuzzy dice. Some studs on them put together by a chain. We went back and forth and sampled these. The sampling process and getting everything done at the factory probably took about 30 days. We'll dive into that in the sampling section, but stoked to put these together, try out some different leather, try out some different studs, and make something cool. Going all the way back to the beginning, if you want to start a brand someday, where do you begin? So step one, and I can't recommend this highly enough, is that you need to build an audience. Now, there's a couple ways to go about this. It doesn't mean you have to go be a creator and talk to the camera like I'm doing. That is way number one. Become a creator in your niche, become an influencer of some kind, put yourself out there and get a following enough that you may be able to bring them into the products that you're creating. Number two is you can actually document the brand journey and do what's called building in public and cover all the things that go into the decisions you're making. And there's a number of good strategies for doing that. But the third is just curating content in your niche. So my friend Sam, for instance, has a really awesome Instagram account and blog that's based on cars. And he has a car themed brand that's been born out of that. But to start, it really was just curating cool imagery, news, and things happening within that space. That is an amazing way to bridge audience into being able to launch a brand without having to actually put your face out there or tell everyone the story of what you're building. But no matter what, whether you are 3 months away from creating your brand or 3 years away from creating your brand, start with audience. And why do I say this? Because there's a few things. At some point, you're going to have to get social media right anyway. There's very few businesses that aren't able to succeed with that in our current world. And for a lot of people, the ability to create that content or have their story, if you start that once your whole brand is developed and all your products are already created, you're starting it too late. If you end up not being good at it, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And so being able to figure that out and actually be like, hey, I got this, even though that might take 30 days, 100 days, a year, is going to show you that you have the potential to do that business. It will validate for you your ability to be an entrepreneur by your ability to navigate and either work with others or by yourself to understand and excel on social media. And then number two is once you have it, it's an eternal source of organic sales. If you're in a business where you either have to rely on retail to make sales for you, or you have to pay via advertising to get the sales you want, you're always going to have your future in someone else's hands. But if you have organic attention and you have some sort of following, whether it's any of the ones I described, you have the ability to continuously just put out more content, connect to the people that you are trying to sell to, and sell products. And being able to do that at the price of merely creating content or merely just putting a story on Instagram, that is a huge leg up that I cannot even begin to describe how much of an advantage it is versus basically generations of launching products prior. And you should take advantage. And keep this going and keep that following building up throughout the entire process that I'm about to break down. Now comes phase two, and I typically would say this is about 90 days. Now I'm gonna give a lot of time frames here. Time frames definitely vary brand to brand, industry to industry. It will take more time sampling something really complex with long production time overseas versus it will doing something domestically. It also could be more complicated formulating like a beverage than it will be to get a shirt design. There's all kinds of caveats, ifs and buts, but I'm just gonna give a generic time frame that shows you kind of how long it takes to put together. And for context, it is now March of 2024. No one to be watching this video, but if you wanted to get a brand live for this holiday season, peak selling, you need to be starting today, in my opinion, to have that done and well executed without kind of hacking the system with any like easy, we're using someone else's product or drop shipping or whatever. You want to build something well architected. If you want to be live for November, December next year, you are doing that now. Back to the beginning. Brief and research your product. That is the first thing to work on. So what do I mean by brief and research? I'll do a whole video on comprehensive briefs coming up. As some of you may know, I'm working on a bag product with my friends at Shift. They have a really cool design and manufacturing business, and we're actually going to run through their entire brief process and the brief I put together for this bag in the future. But a brief and a design is really what you want to come out with. And this is what you're going to give to your manufacturer. This is a description of your product and all the guidelines with which they need to produce it. So if you are creating a candy bar, you're going to need to have some sort of recipe or at least a list of things that you're going to want to get to work with your factory to get to a certain taste or volume. If you're creating a shirt, you're going to want to have your tech pack and all the things that make that special. If you're creating a lamp, you're going to want your various diagrams or models. You need to be able to create the exact picture of what you are going to want produced, and you're going to be able to want to describe it and walk through what makes it different. How is it better than its competition? How are you going to sell it? Actually go through the steps and process of what exists in the market today and how you're making something better. And just to give it a quick overview, ways to make something better are, can you make it cheaper than what's currently offered on the market and offer it at value? Can you make it more premium and a significantly better experience and charge more than what's on the market? Do you solve some crucial usability issue or have some amazing upgrade versus what already exists? Does it taste better? Does it feel better? Would you like to use it more? And then last, does it appeal to some particular niche, to some people better than others? Hey, I'm gonna make soccer shorts for people who have really skinny thighs. Whatever the right thing is that you say, hey, I'm zoned in on this really specific thing and I'm gonna make something for them. Those are beginnings of the different ways you can differentiate your product inside this process. And to do it, you need to research. You should be looking at every product that's on the market. How do they list their specs? What is their stuff made of? How do they sell versus the competition? How do they come up? How many iterations does it take to get there? What have they changed from previous generations of their product to now? Take the time to understand it. While you're developing that brief and getting designs done and whatnot, you want to be working on your brand as well. I covered naming in my previous video, but here you want to be thinking about, what is my actual brand name? What is my logo? What are the different things, fonts, colors that represent my brand? What does design look like? And then doing that process hand in hand with the product creation, because a lot of those same questions about who am I selling this to? How is it better? Are going to end up being things that are important to reflect in the branding you do. People always ask, how do I find people to work on these things? There's always the very cheap route of going to Upwork or Fiverr or some of these folks and finding somebody overseas that can work on it. I'm more of a favor of finding people on social media, people that are putting their portfolios out there on Twitter and Instagram in particular and saying, oh, I'm making beautiful work. And they're trying to promote it, and being able to see that and engage with them there and understanding they have some social savvy and hiring people that way. Obviously you can work within your network and Google, but it's worth finding other professionals at your level or who are working on something together, that especially people that are already on social media, because I think there's something important to actually bridging the gap between those. And then the last part of what happens in phase one is researching vendors. How do I find someone to make my product? I'll do a whole video on how do you find factories, but the short version of it right now is I really like Pietra, who I work with extensively. I found the provider that's making the shoes that I am creating in Pietra. I'll grab those real quick. If you haven't seen these are the sneakers that I'm working on. It's like a skull from the side and top. There's rope lace. This is just V1. V2 is actually gonna be quite a bit different, but I found this vendor that I'm making this with on Pietra. What I like about them is they have pre-vetted products suppliers. So basically they've already talked to all the factories on there versus someone like Alibaba, which just anyone could be on. And so all these people have already at least been through some level of vetting process with the Pietra team. And also if you pay for the more premium version they have, you get a concierge who will help connect you to a vendor and communicate with the vendor. And honestly, for a couple $100, if you don't have experience in this process, getting a pro in there, and shout out to Alex who's helped me again and again on there, then you can actually navigate that process really well. A good example of this is I was creating a cleaning product for a client a year or two ago. I don't know how to create a cleaning product. I know a lot about sourcing and brand development and packaging, but they were able to connect me to someone who had done a similar project for another client. They knew exactly what I was looking for, made the process really streamlined, and I really appreciated it. And beyond that, I think Google's another place to go, especially if you're looking for local things. If you're trying to produce in the US, you're doing things industrial, there's ThomasNet, there's obviously always Alibaba, and there'll be referrals from people that you know and find, but really Pietra and Google are a great place to go start. And if you're looking for beverage, you can search for the term co-packer. There's a lot of kind of nuance there, but you spend time on Google and YouTube, you'll find out what you actually need to search for. What I recommend doing in that phase is getting a list. So having multiple options there that you then go and bring your brief and your designs to, and you're going to be able to say, hey, I want to create this. What does that process look like? How long will it take? What will the cost be? And what's the benefits of working with you? And you can compare those vendors to one another to see who you want to work with. And I'd recommend probably trying or sampling with two, because you always want to have redundancy. And if you just take the first quote that comes apart, you're not going to know if there's some huge disparity in what's being created. And that brings us to the next phase. You have your product brief and your design, you have your brand identity, you've found some factories. Now you're gonna get into sampling. So for sampling, especially for your new brand, you're gonna pay some money to get a V1 of your product done. Then you're going to likely want to change what you see in the V1 and then get a V2 done. And you also pay for this. Over time, if you have relationships or you spend a bunch of money with factories, a lot of your sampling will end up being free. So a good example for some things I'm working on, I'm doing some valuable belts. This is one of the first samples I got. I was basically comparing hardware and the actual style. I ended up really liking the belt style, liking this hardware for the future, but not really into it for this first one. I got this style with this hardware and really liked that. And I ended up going with this belt with a different piece of hardware. And then in its final iteration, I ended up with this particular hardware with this belt in a different color and one of those other options. And it took a few iterations, but they sent me these samples. I'd worked with the factory a bunch before, so this was one where I wasn't paying for the sampling, but if I was, I'd be expecting to pay, $30, $40 for something like this. All the way up to 40 or 100 for a more complicated garment, and even up way higher if you're doing something that's really special. But so you're gonna need a budget for sampling, expect it to take multiple rounds, and what you're really gonna wanna do is get your sample and then detail back what you wanna be improved and what you wanna see different, and then make sure that they're taking that into account and you're communicating well together during the process. There's a lot of dead time in the sampling process. You send your design, they put it in queue to be produced, they produce it, they send you some pictures, and then they mail it to you, then you go get your feedback, and then you do it all again. And so this is why I recommend doing a lot of your setup while you're sampling. Set up your Shopify store, set up your email marketing. I'm using Brevo for mine. I have no relationship or affiliation with them. They were just like a cheap option. I actually looked at who had the most features for the cheapest thing. Most people use Klaviyo for what they're working on with this. Register your social media accounts so you don't have them already. Take care of all the logistics you need in your business while you're sampling. It's also a great time if you want to be submitting trademarks, some of the things I talk about within the naming video I did, and just making sure all of your ducks are in a row for when you're done sampling. Because after this, you're going into production. So once you have something that you want to make and everything is good to go, you actually are going to get it produced. Now, a couple things that happen here. Sometimes you'll be producing and they're going to be packaging everything and getting it ready for production in the one place. Sometimes you're going to be making something somewhere else and it's going to get cased or finished at another facility. So it's logistics. We're going to assume that everything's getting done in one place. It's going to get produced. That takes X amount of time, let's say 30 to 45 days for a soft good. And then it's going to need to get shipped. And shipping, you save money if you can take longer time. So for instance, you can ship by boat. There's what's called a fast boat, and then there's air. And you kind of have the cheapest option, which is the regular boat, to the most expensive option, which is shipping it via air. I would always recommend building in the time to try to ship by boat. It saves a significant amount of money, especially if you have like a heavy item. If you're making small things or jewelry or whatever, just air it, it'll get there right away. But let's assume that it's going to take your 45 days for production and then another 45 days for shipping by boat. And back in the height of the pandemic, sometimes that was 60 days. If you're on a fast boat, sometimes you can end up in 30 days. Varies a bit, but you'll work that through with either your manufacturer or your freight forwarder, which is a term for a logistics agent you can work with. If you're looking for somebody like that, feel free to DM me anywhere. I'll help connect you to people I've worked. And I also know that Pietra, when you work through them, they also have a freight forwarder option that you can just use. While production is happening, again, more downtime. So usually what I recommend doing is using your samples, because you should have a couple things that are mocked up and close to right from the sampling process, if not completely right, or get them to produce a thing and send it to quick. And use that to make all of your content and do all of your launch prep while you are waiting for your stuff to be produced. So basically build out your content plan, make sure you have a bunch of stuff shot, your e-commerce images are ready, you have teasers online, you've picked out your influencers, done all the things you want to do for launch, and you're ready to go. You also want to set up your fulfillment. If you're going to be shipping your own orders, are you going to be then, make sure you're set up in Shopify with something like ShipStation? How are you printing your postage? Do I call a carrier? Does USPS pick up from my house? Whatever your solutions will end up being. Going through all of that, or finding a 3PL. I'm using the Pietra 3PL on mine. They have a warehousing service that, in addition to the factory, that makes it really easy. I'm just starting with them, so I can't critique it super thoroughly, but once I do, I'll make a video breaking down the process. And then when your product arrives, you're going into launch, making sure everything's ready to go, actually QC checking everything that you see. You can ask them before shipment to send you a nice list of, okay, can you send me these pictures, show me these things, make sure everything's to your spec before it gets shipped. And then you actually want to make sure you've seeded your product out, everything's ready to roll, and then you actually launch. Put all that social media you have into, and all of the presence and things you have together into creating one great moment. And we'll do a whole video on launch strategies and drops and pre-orders and stuff in a later time. But if you add all those times together, we're going to say, cool, you're going to establish social media for a bit, curate your niche. We won't even count that time on here. But you have your designing, branding time, let's say that's 90 days, so 3 months. Your sampling time, about 60 days. Now we're at about 5 months. Our production time and shipping at about another 60 days. Now we're about 7 months. So that would, And then you say, hey, my launch period, at least a couple weeks getting everything right and ready, and we're about 8 months. That is a realistic timeline for most industries to go from I have a good idea and some resources and I'm starting today to I am ready to go and sell my stuff. Again, there's faster ways to do it. There will be products that take much slower. I would say all the things that I'm working on, which I've been taking my time on, and obviously do like kind of part-time, additionally all the other things I do, even though I have a team to help, is, we have been probably 8-9 months into it to get to where we are. We're about to start selling stuff in the next few weeks. So that is just a good guideline to have. We have those phases. It's a great roadmap to actually just really practically look at the time commitments and when you go, and then think about when it's going to hit. So holiday is an amazing period, right? If your stuff is done in October, so you're selling in November and December, everyone's shopping. Depending on the seasonality of your product, if people use it outdoors, whatever it is, you can adapt a bit. January, February is rough. Everyone just spent in the holidays. It's cold, short months, people tend to be out of money. That's not the best, most ideal time to launch. But overall, it's worth thinking about when those months will be, when might resonate most with your audience. If you're selling something that might be really useful for Valentine's Day, or people are going to be spending their time with in their summer, think about what the seasonality of that looks like and begin timing what you do accordingly. So you can always push pieces of this and say, you know what, I want to do it, but I don't want to go into production until a month later. Or oh man, I need to speed up this process because otherwise I won't make holiday, which kind of means I have to wait another 6 months before my product will resonate. These are important things to consider. We're going to hit tons more in all these videos that are going to come up next about all the different parts of this process. I'll probably do a video on every single step inside of this. So please like and subscribe. Those are all going to be on the 30 Days of Building a Brand playlist that you'll see. And any questions you have, anything you want to see more information on, please drop below and I'm stoked to share.